Oh, when it all falls down. I'm telling you, it all falls down. Oh, when it all falls down. I'm telling you, it all falls down. Oh, when I'm telling you, it all. It all falls down. I'm telling you, it all. Oh, it all falls down. I'm telling you, it all falls down. Oh, I'm telling you, it all. Oh, it all falls down. I'm telling you, it all. It all falls down. I'm telling you, it all falls down. Oh,
Shalom Alaikum. Ani Yashar Yehuda. Call Halal Yahuwah Bahashem Yahusha. The title of this video is The Two Rahabs. Again, the title of this video is The Two Rahabs. In this video, I will explain that the Rahab mentioned in the book of Joshua, chapter 2, verse 1, and the Rechab mentioned in the book of Matthew, chapter 1, verse 5. In Yahusha's lineage are two different women. Again, I will show that the Rahab mentioned in these two verses are two different women. Most people have a superficial or a surface understanding of who Rahab in the city of Jericho really was. So first, let's establish a timetable, because simple math will be the key to unraveling and unlocking the mystery of who Rahab is. All right, so let me go ahead and read those two verses in the book of Joshua, chapter 2, verse 1, and I'll read Matthew, chapter 1, verse 5. Let's go ahead and get Joshua 2, verse 1. And it reads, "And Joshua, the son of Nun, sent out of Shittim 2 men to spy secretly, saying, Go, view the land, even Jericho. And they went and came into an harlot's house named Rahab and lodged there. Now going to the lineage verse. This is Matthew chapter 1, verse 5. And it reads, And Salmon begot Booz, which is Boaz, of Rechab. And Boaz begot Obed of Ruth. And Obed begot Jesse, which of course was the father of David in the lineage of Yahusha, the Mashiach. So again, I want to bring out and focus on, making the distinction that there were actually two Rahabs. And the key to understanding what I'm bringing out today is simple mathematics. Again, simple mathematics. And just by doing simple mathematics, you will be able to unravel again the mystery of who Rahab was in the book of Joshua. And you will find out if it was possible that Rahab was the same Rechab mentioned in the Messiah Yahusha's heritage that we just read in Matthew chapter 1, verse 5. So again, looking at the mathematics, you will see that the Rahab mentioned in the book of Joshua chapter 2 and the Rechab mentioned in Matthew chapter 1, you will see that there's no way that they could be the same woman. Okay, so let's go ahead and establish that timetable. We know for a fact that the Exodus occurred circa 1446 BC. Again, that's 1446 BC. We know this because we have the record of 1 Kings chapter 6, verse 1. Again, that's 1 Kings chapter 6, verse 1. So let's go ahead and read that. 1 Kings 6 and 1 reads, And it came to pass in the 480th year after the children of Israel were come out of the land of Mizraim or Egypt, in the 4th year of Solomon's reign over Israel, in the month of Ziph, which is the 2nd month, that he began, speaking of Solomon, to build the house of Yahuwah. Okay, so scholars basically agree that King Solomon began his 40-year reign in the year 970 BC. So from 966 BC, which was the 4th year of his reign, which is the year that he began to build the temple, plus the 480 years that we just mentioned, that we just read in 1 Kings chapter 6, verse 1. If you add those two numbers together, 966 plus 480, that will land you in the year 1446 BC. 1446 BC. So we have from those two digits, those two numbers in the equation, a starting point for the Exodus of 1446 BC given to us in Scripture. We also know that the Israelites wandered in the wilderness for 40 years, as per Numbers 32, verse 13. So let's take a look at that verse. This is Numbers 32:13. It reads, "And Yahuwah's anger was kindled against Israel, and he made them wander in the wilderness for 40 years, until all the generation that had done evil in the sight of Yahuwah was consumed." Okay, so now we have more time to add to the timetable. This 40 years, this places the crossing of the river Jordan, or Yarden in the Hebrew, in the year 1406 BC. 1406 BC. So this is the time after the Israelites had wandered in the wilderness for 40 years. After that 40-year time period, we entered into Canaan land. This is the year 1406, as you can see on the screen. 1406 BC is when we entered into the promised land. So again, Israel took Jericho with the cooperation of Rahab, the innkeeper, as opposed to referring to Rahab as the harlot. The Hebrew for harlot is Zonah. Again, the Hebrew word for harlot is Zonah or Zanah, and it is found in the Strong's Concordance under the number H2181. Again, that's H2181, and it means a harlot, but it can also mean an innkeeper or a hostess, as mentioned in the Blue Letter Bible and the Targum. So I have a picture here. This is the Blue Letter Bible. And if you read here, you can see that the word Zonah also makes reference. You can see my mouse. It also makes reference to and gives the definition as a hostess, a keeper of a house of entertainment. So we can see here that that word Zona or Zana also means a hostess or a keeper of a house of entertainment. It not only means a harlot. I bring that particular point out because so many people, they like to jump to conclusions that this woman was definitely some type of a prostitute or a harlot. But this is just another thing that you can look at to draw your conclusion. And again, you can find that definition. This is the Blue Letter Bible. You can also find that in the Targum. The Targum is just a Hebrew pesher. And the word pesher just means a commentary. So you can look at the Hebrew Targums of Jonathan, the Hebrew Targum of Jonathan, and you can get the pesher or commentary of Jonathan. And in that commentary, he mentions that that Rahab was an innkeeper. All right. We also read that Rahab and her family left and went with the Israelites and dwelt on the outskirts of the camp of the Israelites because they were foreigners and unclean. According to the book of Joshua, chapter 6, verse 23. So let's go ahead and take a look at that verse. All right, Joshua 6:23 reads, "And the young men that were spies went in and brought out Rahab and her father and her mother and her brethren and all that she had, and they brought out all her kindred and left them without the camp of Israel." So again, you see that they were left on the outskirts of the camp of Israel, because that's where the foreigners or the people that were unclean had to dwell, because Israel is set apart. We're holy. We're special people unto the Most High power. And you can read that. That's Deuteronomy 7:6. All right, so let's say that we're going to go ahead into the timetable, more of the timetable as far as establishing the age for Rahab. Establishing the age for Rahab. All right, we're going to speak hypothetically here for a minute just to prove a point. All right, so let's say that Rahab, hypothetically, her age was could have been between 20 and 40 years old in the year 1406, which is the year that we entered into the promised land, or entered into Jericho to defeat Jericho. We know that the events in the book of Joshua covers a period of 30 years. We know this because Joshua was 80 years old when he entered the promised land to spy out the land, according to Joshua chapter 14, verse 7. Also, a second witness would be, which is Numbers 32 and 13, which we already read. And we also know that Joshua, or that he died when he was 110 years old, according to the book of Joshua chapter 24 and verse 29. All right, so if you take those verses into account and you take the age that Joshua was in each of those verses, that will give us a number of 30 years for the history of the book of Joshua. So we can add 30 years to the young hypothetical age of Rahab, the supposed harlot, which we already said we're going to hypothetically say that she was 20 years of age. So again, if you add 30 years for the time period for the book of the historical account for the book of Joshua to the 20 years of age that Rahab was, this makes Rahab at least 50 years old. Again, this makes Rahab at least 50 years old at the close of the events in the book of Joshua. And the year would be 1376 BC. Again, that's 1376 BC. The book of Judges covers just over 300 years as per Judges chapter 11 and verse 26. So we're going to get that. So I'm just giving you an idea of the number of years that each book that we're going to that's coming into question here. How many years that each book contains, or how many years it takes for each book to transpire for the events to happen. So we already established that the events that took place, the historical events that took place in the book of Joshua, that was a 30-year period. So now we're looking at the book of Judges. So let's read Judges chapter 11, verse 26, and it reads, "While Israel dwelt in Heshbon and her towns, and in Aror and her towns, and in all the cities that be along by the coast of Arnon, 300 years. Why therefore did ye not recover them within that time?" So this is speaking of the judge Jephthah, speaking about the people of the Ammonites who were trying to stake a claim to that land. And he was saying that they had possession of that land by the time of Judges chapter 11 for 300 years. Okay. However, by the time that we read up to Judges chapter 5, 236 years would have passed, which would make Rahab 256 years old. So again, Judges chapter 1, Judges chapter 2, Judges chapter 3, Judges chapter 4, and Judges chapter 5. That's covering a time period of 236 years. So if you add those 236 years, hold on 1 minute. So if you add those 236 years to the 20 years of age that Rahab was when she left up out of Jericho with the Israelites, that would make Rahab 256 years old before we reach the book of Judges chapter 6. And it's my contention that the book of Judges chapter 6 is the chapter where the events in the book of Ruth actually took place. So again, this would mean that Rahab would have to be at least 200 years old by the time she gave birth to Boaz. Again, that would make Rahab have to be at least 200 years old by the time she would give birth to Boaz. Okay, so these numbers are, of course, very far-fetched and unparalleled in scripture for that time period. So it should be clear to all rational-minded individuals that Rahab could not possibly be the same Rahab mentioned in Yahusha or Jesus's lineage in Matthew chapter 1, verse 5. So you have to keep those timetables and keep those events that took place in scripture. You got to keep that in mind when you're calculating this time. And you will clearly see again that those dates and those time periods and those ages don't add up for Rahab being that same woman that was the mother of Boaz. Again, she would have to be at least 200 years old by the time she would have given birth to Boaz. All right, so my next thing I want to bring out is I want to look at is the linguistics. So I want to play a clip from an Israelite brother by the name of Judah Teach on YouTube. And he's going to bring out the differences in the names of Rahab and Rechab, which gives further linguistic proof that we are dealing with two separate or different Rahabs, Rahab and Rechab.
Alive. Okay, now let's look at this verse in Greek. Here it is on the screen.
WordTune helps you write better, so you can win at work.
Read this, but I just want you to look at it so I can show you something. When you look at verse 25, notice that it says Kai Rahab. This word Rahab is Rahab. So we know now that the name Rahab in the Greek is Raab, R-A-A-B. Now, even though this is an Old Testament verse, which was written in Hebrew, we're actually reading the Greek version of the Old Testament. So we're dealing strictly with the Greek, so that when we go to the New Testament, which was written in Greek, there shouldn't be any drastic spelling changes for the same name. In other words, if we read the name Rahab from the Old Testament in Greek, it should be the same name in the New Testament in Greek, because it's all Greek. So in Joshua 6:25, we see that Rahab is Raab. Now, let's go to Hebrews chapter 11, verse 31 in Greek. Here it is. This one is easier to understand because you can see the English written under the Greek. Now, here you see the name Rahab, and above it, it says Raab, just like we saw when we looked at Joshua 6:25 in the Greek. Hebrews 11 and 31 has the same name, Raab, R-A-A-B. And right above it, you see the Greek letters, the Greek way of spelling Rahab or Raab. Now, let's go to James 2:25 in the Greek. Here it is. And again, you see the name Rahab, and right above it, Raab, R-A-A-B. And above that, you see the same Greek spelling for Rahab or Raab as we saw before. Now remember, this is all Greek. So let's go to Matthew 1 and 5 and look at the name written in the genealogy of the Messiah. Now, if it's the same spelling or the same Greek letters, then you could say that this is Rahab the harlot. But if it's a different spelling and a different name, you have to admit that it's a whole different person, because we've been dealing with the Greek only in the Old and the New Testament. So there is no reason for the name to be spelled different. The translation excuse does not apply because we've been looking only at the Greek. So if it's a different name, you have to admit that it's a different person. Here we go. Matthew 1 and 5 in the Greek. Now, when you read the English, it says Salmon begot Boaz of Rechab. And when you look above it, it says Rechab. Notice that it doesn't say Raab like it did before in the other verses. And when you look above that at the actual Greek writing, you can see that the spelling is different. Here are the two names side by side. Raab, which is Rahab, and Rechab, which is Rechab. These are two different names. Therefore, you have to conclude that these are two different women. There's no translation going on because this is all Greek. So Rahab the harlot is not listed in the genealogy of the Messiah. Solomon did not marry her. Solomon married an Israelite woman named Rechab. I mean, that's pretty much it. We just went through the scriptures in English and verified it in the Greek. I hope you can see it. And with that, I say,
okay, so we just had an example of the brother bringing out that there is, in fact, a difference in the names that were given in the New Testament. And again, you can look that up in the Septuagint as well. And you can see that in the Greek, they are different names. Here's an example that he already brought out in that short clip. And then you see all of those names are spelled just R-A-A-B. And then you got this one in Matthew chapter 1, verse 5. You have that X or the chi symbol, which is the C, the CH. So that's the Rechab. So you can clearly see Rechab being different from the other verses. They got Hebrews 11 and 31. That it mentions Rahab the harlot. We have James 2:25. Again, Rahab the harlot. But we see the spelling of the names differently in the Greek. So many people that get tripped up by this particular name, Rahab, but there are many instances and cases of people in the Bible that have the same name. For instance, we have King Saul, and of course we have Saul the apostle. We have Joseph, the son of Jacob, and we have Joseph, the father of Yahusha in the New Testament. We have Tamar, Judah's daughter-in-law, and we have Tamar, the daughter of David. We have Yahusha, the leader after Joshua, the leader after Moses, and we have Joshua, the high priest, in the book of Zechariah. There are many cases like this where we have similar names or the exact name, and they are different people. So people do make that mistake, and they try to say that Rahab is the same. This harlot woman Rahab that they speak of in the book of Joshua chapter 2 is the same woman that's mentioned in the lineage of Yahusha in Matthew chapter 1. But again, if you go and search it out for yourself and go back and look at the video, I gave many examples and also video clips that exposes that to be a fallacy. So again, you have to do like 2 Timothy 2:15, study to show yourself approved, and get this wisdom, get this knowledge, and get this understanding by any means. So I want to thank you all for taking the time to listen to this, and look forward to any comments and questions. Shalom.